2040, and welcome to a very special edition of the Progressive Rock and Metal Album Review Series. And today I'm going to be taking a look at the amazing and incredible catalogue from one of the finest bands to ever come out of Sweden. And this band has been a force since bursting onto the prog scene back in the mid 1990s, and they are still going very strong to this day as we speak. And I've been a huge fan of this band for a really long time now. And I've had the great pleasure of seeing this incredible band live many times over the years since their 2012 comeback, whether they were a support act or part of a double bill or as a headlining act. I have seen this band live in all forms, and I can honestly tell you now, for my money, this band are one of the absolute best I have ever seen live in any genre. And this band has got it all: unbelievable musicianship, top notch quality music, a tremendous sound, great hooks, and catchy harmonies. You name it, this band has got it all and then some. And these guys are as prog as they come, and they put the prog in epic. And these guys never short you of lengthy material, and they always know how to put on a fantastic live show. They always play their soul out and leave it all out on the stage. And some of the best shows I have ever seen were seeing this incredible band. And I've just got finished listening to this band's entire catalogue of albums, and my goodness, what an unbelievable catalogue of music! Just tremendous stuff, in my opinion. And this is a band that I've been wanting to discuss on this series for a really long time now. And I am super pumped to be discussing this band's entire catalogue of albums. And this is a band that, quite frankly, in my opinion, needs no introduction whatsoever. I'm talking about, of course, the one and only Swedish progressive rock band, the Flower Kings. So, the Flower Kings was formed in 1994 by guitarist, composer, multi instrumentalist, and singer Roine Stolt, and he put together a touring band to support his solo album, which was called The Flower King. And Roine Stolt decided to turn this touring band into a full time working band and took the name of his solo album, The Flower King, and dubbed the band The Flower Kings. And when you hear The Flower Kings, you know straight away it's them, as they have a very distinct and recognizable sound that's very unique. There are very few bands out there that sound quite like The Flower Kings, and you know within the first 5 seconds that it's them, because there are very few bands out there that sound quite like the Flower Kings. And the Flower Kings, over the course of their 3+ decade career as a band, have had a number of different lineup changes, but at the helm has always been Roine Stolt, who has pretty much been the main guy of the band since its inception, and in many ways, he is, no pun intended, the Flower King. And as I said, the Flower Kings have had a number of different lineup changes, but when I think of the Flower Kings, I think of the classic lineup comprised of Roine Stolt, Hasse Froberg, Jonas Reingold, Thomas Bodin, and Zoltan Cesar. That for me is the classic Flower Kings lineup. And I'm not taking anything away from all of the other Flower Kings lineups. They've all been good. Some are maybe a little bit stronger than others. But when I think of the classic lineup of the Flower Kings, I think of that incarnation. I just thought they really stood out to me. It lasted quite some time, and they put out some fantastic music, and it just sounded really tight. So, for today's special edition, I am going to be discussing the entire catalogue of the Flower Kings, which is a total of 17 studio albums. And as always, I'm going to be talking about each album individually, and I'll be choosing which one I think is the best one. This is a massive challenge for me because after listening to the band's entire catalogue of albums, there are no bad albums in the Flower Kings catalogue. There are some that are excellent, there are some that are classics, there are some that are underrated, and there might be one or two that are maybe not as strong, but on the whole, overall, the catalogue of the Flower Kings is tremendously strong. There are some albums that could easily be a number one or an all time favourite, and it's very hard to choose because they're all so good. And of course, there are a few albums that I feel are a little bit better than others. But when you've got a catalogue like the Flower Kings, where it's very hard to choose which album is the best, that's when you know you've got a very good band, because I've seen some bands that have maybe 4 or 5 albums that are really good, and the rest of their other albums are maybe not as strong. You won't get this problem with the Flower Kings whatsoever. This is top notch quality music as far as I'm concerned. So, we're going to start with the first album, and this one came out in 1985, and this one is called Back in the World of Adventures. So, this is the first album from the Flower Kings, and my goodness, what a debut! This album is so good, and this one really blew my mind and really blew me away because it was absolutely fantastic. And it's got everything you love about the progressive rock genre: unbelievable musicianship, top notch music, great hooks, catchy harmonies, you name it. This album has got it all, and it's epic. It's as epic as it gets, and a lot of the songs on this album have gone on to become classics in the Flower Kings set list, and some of these songs they still play to this day. And it's a very strong debut album. And this album really made a statement to me. It really spoke to me a lot and said that prog rock is not dead, it's alive and very well. And this album is definitely proof of that. I just really enjoyed this one a lot, and some excellent material from Roine Stolt. Just a really good, strong prog rock album, in my opinion. So we've got the first incarnation of the Flower Kings, comprised of Roine Stolt on guitars, lead vocals, and keyboards. And we've got Thomas Bodin on keyboards, piano, Hammond organ, mellotron, and flute. Now, Thomas Bodin, for me, was the difference maker of the Flower Kings. His keyboard playing really helped give the Flower Kings their musical identity, and Thomas Bodin really played a big role in not only shaping the Flower Kings sound, but also in the music as well, as you'll see as we go through the catalogue of the Flower Kings. A tremendous keyboardist as far as I'm concerned, and a guy who I feel is irreplaceable. You know, obviously the Flower Kings have had some great keyboardists in their bands, but for me, Thomas Bodin, he's as much as the Flower Kings as Roine Stolt. When I think of the Flower Kings, Bodin is usually the first guy I think of. He's just super talented and just a tremendous keyboard player, a true prog man through and through. And we've got Roine Stolt's brother, Michael Stolt, on bass, and we've got Jamie Salazar on drums, and Hassi Brunison on percussion, and we've also got a guest appearance from Juf Wallander on saxophone, who is featured on 3 tracks. But excellent album, a nice, fine representation of what prog rock is all about, and just an absolute classic. Very enjoyable album. Really like this one a lot, and just so powerful. Really packed a hell of a punch. And from the first opener, wow, I just thought to myself, damn, this is so good, you know, and it still holds up very well. after all these years, it's really held up very well, and the music is just excellent. So we got the first track, World of Adventures, which is 13 minutes long, unbelievable track, just fantastic. And then we got Atomic Prince slash Kaleidoscope, which is excellent. Go West Judas, which is brilliant. Train to Nowhere is great. Oblivion Road is great. Theme for a Hero is great. The Temple of the Snakes is great. My Cosmic Lover is great. The Wonder Wheel is brilliant. And the closer, which is like 13 minutes as well. Big Puzzle. Just absolutely amazing stuff. Just a really good, strong debut album from the Flower Kings. And the standout tracks for me are World of Adventures, Big Puzzle, Go West Judas, Oblivion Road, Theme for a Hero, and My Cosmic Hero, and The Wonder Wheel. But the whole album, top to bottom, is a prog rock masterpiece, and everybody is at the top of their game. It's just absolutely amazing. And even the tracks that have saxophone as well, they're just absolutely gorgeous. And this is a true throwback to prog, but with a modern twist. Just an absolute amazing album. So there you have it. Back in the world of adventures, the first Flower Kings album, and the one that officially started for the band, and for me remains one of the band's best albums ever. Absolutely love this one. What a debut! Fantastic stuff. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 1996, and this one is called Retropolis. So this is the second album from the Flower Kings, and it's equally as good as their first album, Back in the World of Adventures. And there are some songs that are classic Flower Kings, some that they still play to this day, and this album is equally as strong as their debut. And the beauty of the Flower Kings with their music, they were just warming up, and wow, this album is fantastic. So the lineup on this album is pretty much the same as the first album, but this time we've got Hasse Froberg, who is featured on a couple of tracks, and he would also go on to become the band's second guitarist slash vocalist, and he's pretty much been a cornerstone of the band since he joined and is still with the Flower Kings to this day. A tremendous singer and a great guitarist in his own right. And he's also got a great band of his own called The Musical Companion, which is equally as good as the Flower Kings. Highly recommend you check them out. They're just fantastic. So, this album from top to bottom is tremendously strong and some unbelievable material. So, we've got the first track, Rhythm of Life, which is more or less like an intro. And then we got the 11-minute epic, the title track, Retropolis, which is just absolutely dynamite and just classic Flower Kings. Rhythm of the Sea is excellent. There is More to This World, which is like a 10-minute epic, absolutely amazing. Romancing the City is great. The Melting Pot is great. Silent Sorrow is brilliant. The Judas Kiss is great. Retropolis by Night is great. Flora Majora is great, and The Road Back Home, fantastic album, top to bottom, absolutely brilliant. Roine Stolt, a great singer, great guitarist, and Bodin, just an absolute powerhouse on the keyboards, and Jamie Salazar just absolutely kicking ass on the drums. Michael Stolt, great solid bass player. Hasse Froberg, just a great singer, and Hasse Brunhus just bringing lots of wackiness with his percussion playing. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Jamie Muir from King Crimson. He's just all over this album. And Youth Wonder, just a great sax player and just brings in so many gorgeous melodies with his sax playing. Just an amazing musician. So the standout tracks for me are, of course, Retropolis, There Is More to This World, The Melting Pot, Silent Sorrow, Retropolis by Night, and The Road Back Home. But the whole album, from top to bottom, is just excellent. One of the best Flower Kings albums ever, and an absolute classic. And as I said, some of these songs they still play to this day. So there you have it. Retropolis, another classic album from the Flower Kings and equally as strong as their debut back in the World of Adventures. So there you have it. Retropolis, excellent stuff and unbelievable album from the Flower Kings, who are really just getting warmed up. Love it. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 1987, and this one is a double album, and this one is called Stardust We Are. Now, for me, Stardust We Are, and I think I speak for everyone out there, Stardust We Are could very well be the greatest Flower Kings album of all time. And it's one that still gets talked about a lot to this day. And for good reason. It's got a lot of the classic songs that the Flower Kings are still playing to this day. And it just made a huge impression. You know, this for me was when the Flower Kings really hit their peak and really knocked this one straight out of the park. So when you think of the classic Flower Kings album, 9 times out of 10, it's always Stardust We Are. It's just an amazing album. And you'll notice as we go through the catalogue of the Flower Kings, they have put out a lot of double albums. So there is a lot of material. But as far as double albums, there are very few that match the epicness and magic of Stardust We Are. It's their signature album. You know, some bands have got their signature album that fans talk about a lot to this day. Rush have got Moving Pictures. You know, Genesis have got The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Yes have got Close to the Edge. And the Flower Kings have got Stardust We Are. This is their Close to the Edge. You know, this is where everything all came together and the band were really starting to knock it out of the park in a big way. So on disc one, we got In the Eyes of the World, which is a 10-minute epic, just absolutely incredible. A Rumour Review is great. Just This Once is excellent. Church of Your Hearts is great. Poor Mr. Rain's Ordinary Guitar is great. The Man Who Walked with Kings is excellent. Circus Brimstone, which is a 12-minute epic, just amazing. Crying Clown is great. And Compassion is excellent. And then we got on disc two, Pipes of Peace, it's great. The End of Innocence is great. The Merry-Go-Round is brilliant. Dawn of the Universe is great. A Day at the Mall, which is like 45 seconds. Different People is great. Kingdom of Lies is great. If 28 is great. Ghost of the Red Cloud is great. Hotel Nirvana is great. And of course, last but surely not least, the 25 plus epic Stardust We Are, the title track. Doesn't get any better than this. This is the ultimate Flower Kings album. And the lineup we've got here is Roine Stolt, Thomas Bodin, Jamie Salazar, Michael Stolt, Hans Brunison, Hasse Froberg, and Hakan Almakist and Juf Wallander. Just one of many of the classic Flower Kings lineups. Just everyone is on top form, and it's just Flower Kings at their peak as far as I'm concerned. So the standout tracks for me on this one are In the Eyes of the World, Church of Your Heart, Circus Brimstone, and Compassion. And the standout tracks for me on this two are The End of Innocence, The Merry-Go-Round, Kingdom of Lies, Ghost of the Red Cloud, and of course Stardust We Are. And it's got such a memorable intro. Do, 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 do. Just unbelievable stuff and just an unbelievable album. Absolutely enjoyed the hell out of this one so much. Just a great classic album from the Flower Kings and quite possibly the band's greatest ever, in my opinion. So there you have it. Stardust We Are, for my money, the greatest Flower Kings album of all time. Absolutely love it. Classic prog, as far as I'm concerned. Love it. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 1999, and it's a double album, and it's one of my favorites. And this one is called Flower Power. So, Flower Power, as I mentioned, is a double album, and it's one of my favorites. And wow, that's all I've got to say is wow. If you thought Stardust We Are was epic, and it is, the Flower Kings take it to the next level. And to say that this album is epic would be an understatement. This album is just like one big massive symphony. And if there was ever any doubt about whether or not the Flower Kings put out epic pieces, this album I think really put that to rest because this album takes epic to the umpteenth level. It's just an unbelievable album and so much great music here. And really, you've really got to sit down and listen to this all the way through to really take it all in because there's a lot of music to digest. So on disc one, we've got the big 18 part epic called Garden of Dreams, which is almost 1 hour long and it's made up of 18 parts, as I mentioned, and it's 59 minutes long. If that ain't prog for you, I don't know what is because 59 minutes, I mean, really and truly, that could have just been one disc on its own. But the Flower Kings, as I said, they never short you of material, and Garden of Dreams is definitely no exception to that rule. 59 minutes, that's just mad, just absolutely mad. And then we've got Captain Capstan, which is like 55 seconds, and then IKEA by Night, which is what, 5 seconds. And then we go straight into Astral Dog, just just a really good track. And then we go to disc two. We've got Deaf, Numb, and Blind, which is 11 minutes long. Absolutely brilliant. Stupid Girl is great. Corruption is one of my favorites on this track. Power of Kindness is great. Psychedelic Postcard is great. Hudson River Sirens Call 1998 is great. Magic Pie is great. Painter is brilliant. Calling Home is great. And Afterlife is excellent. The whole album, from top to bottom, is a prog rock masterpiece and one of my all time favourites from the Flower Kings. And it's got everything you want in a prog album. Just lengthy songs, great hooks, catchy harmonies, quirky vocals, top notch musicianship, you name it, it's got it all and then some. And you'll see over the course of this album, now originally Roine Stolt composed most of the music. But as I said at the beginning, Thomas Bodin ended up playing quite a big role in the music, and he co-wrote a lot of the material with Stolt, and his presence is really felt on this album. So the standout tracks for me on disc one easily is Garden of Dreams. I mean, come on, 59 minutes. I mean, if that's not a standout, I don't know what is. And Astral Dog is great. And then on disc two, the standouts are Deaf, Numb, and Blind, Psychedelic Postcard, Calling Home, Magic Pie is great, and Corruption is great. But just the whole album is just brilliant. So there you have it. Flower Power, an epic album from the Flower Kings, and one of my all time favourites from the band. And this would also mark the final appearance of brother Michael Stolt, who would leave just after this album was completed. But what a way to go out! And he played quite a big role on this album as well. And all due respect to Michael Stolt, he's a solid bass player and he's pretty good in his own right. But his replacements would really help change the game for the Flower Kings as far as I'm concerned. So there you have it. Flower Power, one of my all time favourites from the Flower Kings. An absolute epic double album. One of my favourites. Absolutely love it. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2000, and this one is called Space Revolver. So Space Revolver marks the first appearance of Jonas Rheingold, who replaced Michael Stolt. And all due respect to Michael Stolt, a fine bass player in his own right, and played an important role on the first four Flower Kings albums. But Jonas Rheingold, for me, when he joined the Flower Kings, he absolutely changed the game. And he's a fantastic bass player, and he really helped shape the sound of the Flower Kings that we know now. And for me, having Jonas Rheingold join the Flower Kings, that for me is like Jaco Pastorius joining Weather Report. It's such a big deal. It's a game changer. And Jonas Rheingold, you know, he just completely changed the entire band for the better. And I'm not taking anything away from Michael Stoltz's contributions. He's a fine bass player, but Jonas Rheingold, he's just an absolute monster bass player, in my opinion. And he just fits in very well with the Flower Kings and plays like he's been playing with them for years. A true testament to his musicianship and his ability. And he would go on to not only shape the band's sound, but also play an important role in the composing as well. Just an all round great bass player and certainly one of the best to come out of Sweden. And he's got a great band of his own, Car Mechanic, which are excellent. And he's currently in the Steve Hackett band as well. Just an amazing bass player. So, Space Revolver, surprisingly, is a single album. So, that's a bit of a difference here because quite a lot of the Flower Kings albums, as I mentioned earlier, are doubles. So it's quite surprising that we got a single. So that's cool. So we've got I Am the Sun, Part 1, 15 minutes long. One of the greatest Flower Kings songs of all time. Dream on Dreamer is great. Rumble Fish Twist is great. Monster Within is excellent, which is like 12 minutes long. Chicken Farmer Song is great. Underdog is brilliant. You Don't Know What You've Got is great. Slave to Money is great. A King's Prayer is great. And I Am the Sun Part 2. Overall, top to bottom, excellent album. Jonas Rheingold all over this album with his great bass playing. Roine Stolt on top form with his vocals and guitar playing. Hasse Froberg is great as always, and Thomas Bodin is just an absolute monster on the keyboards. And Jamie Salazar is kicking world class ass on the drums, just an amazing drummer. And this lineup, I would say this was another great Flower Kings lineup as well. But Jonas Rheingold really played a big part on this album. And I would probably go as far as to say that both Bodin and Rheingold, they were the difference makers for the Flower Kings. They just really elevated the music of the Flower Kings. They just done such a tremendous job shaping the identity and sound of the Flower Kings. Just great musicians, and they were definitely cornerstones of the band for years and years. So the standout tracks for me are I Am the Sun Part 1, Monster Within, Underdog, Slave to Money, King's Prayer, Rumble Fish Twist, and I Am the Sun Part 2. Overall, Space Revolver, one of the best Flower Kings albums ever. Absolutely enjoyed this one so much. Great album from the Flower Kings, who really were picking up momentum in a big way. So there you have it, Space Revolver. Love it. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2001, and this one is called The Rainmaker. So another great album from the Flower Kings, and this time it's a single again, so it's not a double, but there is a lot of great music on this album, and some of the tracks on this album would go on to become Flower Kings classics, and some of them they still play to this day. And it's a really good, strong album from start to finish. And my goodness, this album is just as epic as it comes. So We've got the 11-minute opener, Last Minute on Earth, which is excellent. World Without a Heart is great. Road to Sanctuary is excellent, which is 13 minutes long. And we've got the title track, which is an instrumental. The Rainmaker is great. City of Angels is excellent. Elaine is great. Through the Walls is great. Sword of God is great. Blessing of a Smile is great. And Red Alert is excellent. And Serious Dreamers is great. Top to bottom, a very strong album, equally as good as Space Revolver, and just an epic album as only the Flower Kings can deliver. And the standout tracks for me are Last Minute on Earth, Road to Sanctuary, City of Angels, Sword of God, and Serious Dreamers. But overall, a very good album. And from my understanding, this was originally an album that the Flower Kings were not going to be playing live, but fans kept insisting they wanted to hear it, so they did, and they've been playing it ever since. But excellent album, start to finish, and this would also mark the final appearance of original drummer Jamie Salazar, who would leave after this album was completed. And he's a really good drummer, and he played an important role also in helping to shape the band's overall sound. But my goodness, what a way to go out! Just a fantastic album. So there you have it, The Rainmaker, another great album from the Flower Kings, and one of my all-time favourites. Just fantastic stuff. So there you have it, The Rainmaker. Love it. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2002, and it's a double album, and this one is called Unfold the Future. For me, this is one of the best Flower Kings albums of all time, and I will definitely put this one up there with Flower Power and Stardust We Are. Just an epic album, lots of great songs, lots of songs that the Flower Kings still play to this day, and top to bottom, it's just fantastic. It really is one of the best Flower Kings albums of all time, and one of my favourites from the band. And Unfold the Future would mark the first appearance of Zoltan Szores, who replaced original drummer Jamie Salazar. And Zoltan Szores, for me, is probably the best Flower Kings drummer they have ever had. And I'm not taking anything away from Jamie Salazar's drumming. He really helped build up the band, but I think technically Zoltan Szores is just maybe a little bit better than him, and he really helped beef up the Flower Kings sound in a big way. And for me, technically, he probably was the best Flower Kings drummer they have ever had. And for me, this is the album that featured the birth of the classic Flower Kings lineup for me, comprised of Thomas Bodin, Zoltan Szores, Roine Stolt, Hasse Froberg, and Jonas Reingold. I just think when I think of the Flower Kings classic lineup, I think of that incarnation. I just thought they really stood out to me as a band, in my opinion. Just an amazing drummer, Zoltan. He really is. And as I said, probably the best drummer they've ever had as far as classic Flower Kings drummers. He's just so good and really helped play an important role in the band's music. And it's a double album, once again. As I mentioned before, you'll see a lot of double albums in this catalogue. So there's no short of material with this one. And just really big, just a massive album and very enjoyable. So on disc one, we've got The Truth Will Set You Free, one of the greatest Flower King songs of all time. 30 minutes. Nothing like kicking off things with a bang. And then we've got Monkey Business is great. Black and White is excellent. Christian Opel is great. Silent Inferno is great. The Navigator is great. And Vox Humana is great. And then on disc two, we've got Genie in a Bottle. Fast Lane is great. Grand Old World is great. Soul Vortex is great. Rolling the Dice is one of my favourites. The Devil's Dance School is brilliant. Man Overboard is great. Solitary Shell is great. And then we've got the closer, which is 24 minutes long. Devil's Playground. Top to bottom, an excellent double album from the Flower Kings. and lots of memorable songs. And as I said, some of these songs they still play to this day. And the standouts for me on this one are The Truth Will Set You Free, one of the greatest Flower King songs of all time, and certainly up there with Stardust We Are. And this song's just got a very memorable intro. Do, 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 do. Always brings the house down. Black and White is great. Christian Opel is great. Silent Inferno is great. And The Navigator is great. And the standouts for me on disc 2 are Genie in a Bottle, Soul Vortex, and Devil's Playground. So there you have it. Unfold the Future, one of the best Flower Kings albums ever, and one of my all-time favourites, and just a classic Flower Kings album that I would definitely put up there with Flower Power and Stardust. We are just absolutely incredible. So there you have it. Unfold the Future. Fantastic. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2004, and this one is called Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, another great album from the Flower Kings, and one I really enjoyed a lot. Had some really good, strong songs, and this is the only Flower Kings album to feature Daniel Gildenlow, founder of Pain of Salvation, as an official member of the band, because originally he was kind of like a guest and he would often sit in with the Flower Kings live. This was the only album that he is an official member of the band, and he plays a big role on this album. You know, he does a lot of vocals and adds extra guitars and little bits and bobs here, and he's just a super talented musician. And him and Roine Stolt would go on to co-form The Sea Within many years later, and Daniel Gildenlow would also play with Roine Stolt as part of Transatlantic, and he fits in well with the Flower Kings, which is no surprise because he's also a fellow Swede, and he is just, as I mentioned, super talented. And Adam and Eve, just a really good, strong, and enjoyable Flower Kings album. So we've got the first track, which is 19 minutes long, Love Supreme, excellent opener. Cosmic Circus is excellent. Babylon is great, which is just like a little short instrumental. Vampire's View is brilliant. Days Gone By is great, just a little short instrumental once again. The title track, Adam and Eve, is excellent. Starlight Man is great. Timelines is brilliant. Driver's Seat is excellent. And we've got The Blade of Cain, which is brilliant. But the whole album, top to bottom, I think is really good. Just classic Flower Kings as far as I'm concerned. And the standout tracks for me are Love Supreme, Vampire's View, Adam and Eve, Driver's Seat, and The Blade of Cain. Just an enjoyable album. Very good, strong, and enjoyable Flower Kings album. So there you have it, Adam and Eve, one of my favourites from the Flower Kings. Just a really good, strong album. And it's a single album. No double here, but still very good. Just a very good, strong album. So there you have it, Adam and Eve. Great album. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2006, and it's a double album, and this one is called Paradox Hotel. So Zoltan Sazurs is gone, and replacing him on the drums is Marcus Lindquist, and this features his first and only appearance with the band. And Paradox Hotel, to a lot of people, marked the beginning of the end for the Flower Kings, in the sense that a lot of fans felt that this marked a huge shift in the band's music. You know, you still had epic songs, but there were a lot of short songs on this album compared to their earlier albums, which was full of long, lengthy songs. Now, I've listened to Paradox Hotel, both discs. I enjoyed both very much. I thought it was a really good album. But compared to some of the other Flower Kings albums, this album, not bad, not terrible by any means, very enjoyable, maybe not as strong as some of the other Flower Kings albums. The quality's still there, the musicianship, the playing, nothing against that. It's all good, but I just kind of feel that change was in the air. So I'm not entirely sure what was going on at the time this album was being put together, but I couldn't help but notice that you still had epic, lengthy songs, but maybe not as much. You know, some of the lengthy songs were diminished a little bit. So whereas you had three or four, you know, lengthy songs, here there's a lot of short songs. So as I said, I'm not entirely sure what was going on at the time, but this was still a good album. I enjoyed it a lot. I think I enjoyed disc two maybe just a little bit more, but overall, Paradox Hotel still a great album, but I wouldn't say it's a classic Flower Kings album. I respect it, I appreciate it. I don't dislike it. I know some people have said to me, "Oh, I kind of went off the Flower Kings after Paradox Hotel. They were never really the same." Well, you know, Flower King's bad albums is still better than most of the band's best albums. You know, Flower King's worst is still better than most people's best, depending on how you look at it. But Paradox Hotel, still a great album, maybe not as strong as some of the others. So on disc one, we got Check In, which is like a little short instrumental. Then we got the big 21-minute epic Monsters and Men. Really enjoyed that one a lot. That's classic Flower Kings days. Then we've got Jealousy, which is a good song. Hit Me With a Hit is great. Pioneers of Aviation is great. Lucy Had a Dream is great. Brahavian Skies is great. Self Consuming Fire is great. Mummy Leave the Light On is great. And End on a High Note is great. Then on disc two, we've got Minor Giant Steps is great. Touch My Heaven is great. The Unorthodox Dancing Lesson is great. Man of the World is great. Life Will Kill You is great. The Way the Waters Are Moving is great. What If God Is Alone is great. And the title track, Paradox Hotel, is great. And Blue Planet. Overall, a very good album, very enjoyable. Maybe not as strong as some of the other Flower Kings albums, but I quite liked it. You know, I thought there was some really good, strong material. But when you look at other albums like Flower Power, you know, Space Revolver, and Stardust We Are, and you put it up against Paradox Hotel, unfortunately for Paradox Hotel is going to come out on the losing end because those albums are just classics. They're just absolutely classics. Is Paradox Hotel a good Flower Kings album? Absolutely. Is it a classic Flower Kings album? Probably not, but still enjoyable. As I said at the beginning, overall, by and large, this is a very strong catalogue, but Paradox Hotel, maybe not as strong, maybe just a little bit weak, in my opinion. So the standout tracks for me on disc one are Monsters and Men, End on a High Note, Pioneers of Aviation, Lucy Had a Dream, and Self Consuming Fire. And the standout tracks for me on disc two are Minor Giant Steps, Life Will Kill You, Blue Planet, Paradox Hotel, and Man of the World. But overall, Paradox Hotel, a good Flower Kings album, maybe not as strong as some of the other Flower Kings albums. Maybe it's a little bit on the weak side, but a lot of people consider Paradox Hotel to be the beginning of the end for the Flower Kings because there are a lot of short songs. There are a couple of epic, lengthy songs, which the Flower Kings are known for, but I don't know really. I mean, musically, it's excellent as you'd expect from the Flower Kings. But would I put it as a classic Flower Kings album? Probably not. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It's just I feel that there are some other albums from the Flower Kings that are a little bit better than others. So there you have it. Paradox Hotel, an enjoyable Flower Kings album, but maybe not as strong as some of the others, in my opinion. So there you have it. Paradox Hotel. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2007, and it's a double album, and this one is called The Sum of No Evil. So, The Sum of No Evil marks the return of drummer Zoltan Szuzurs, and this would be his first and last appearance as the drummer for the Flower Kings. And the Sum of No Evil, some people have said that what started with Paradox Hotel marked pretty much the end for the Flower Kings with this album. But there's still some really good material on this album. But you could kind of see that the writing was on the wall. There are still some epics on this album, but there are a couple of shorter songs as well. So this album, not bad by any means, still very enjoyable, but I can kind of see what people mean that, Paradox Hotel was the beginning of the end for the band, with shorter songs. And unfortunately, that trend kind of continued with The Sum of No Evil, but I still liked it. Thought there were some really good songs on here, but this would pretty much be the end of the Flower Kings for a while. They would go on a hiatus, which would last for a number of years. And this album, still very good, still very enjoyable. Everyone is on top form. They play, you know, with the highest level, as you'd expect from a band, the magnitude of the Flower Kings. But when you look at what they put out before and you put it up against this, yeah, I can see what people mean. But I'm not taking anything away from this album. Still enjoyed this one a lot. But yeah, maybe this album is a little bit more stronger than Paradox Hotel. But yeah, when you look at some of the other albums, maybe not one of the Flower Kings' best albums, but still a good album from the Flower Kings. So on disc one, we got One More Time, which is a 13-minute epic, which is excellent. And then we got Love Is the Only Answer, which is 24 minutes long. That's more like it. Really good track. Trading My Soul is great. The Sum of No Reason, which is 13 minutes long. Really good song. Flight 999, Brimstone Air is great. Flying Motion is great, which is 12 minutes long. Nice. And then on disc two, we've got like three tracks. So we've got two studio tracks and a demo track. So we've got The River, which is great, and Turn the Stone is great, and Regal Divers, which is just like, a demo track, which is okay for what it is. So the standout tracks for me on disc one are One More Time, Love Is the Only Answer, The Sum of No Reason, and Life in Motion. Overall, a good, strong album. I would say that The Sum of No Evil is a little bit more stronger than Paradox Hotel. I know some people said that Paradox Hotel and The Sum of No Evil pretty much marked the beginning of the end for the Flower Kings. But I would say The Sum of No Evil more than makes up for what we didn't get with Paradox Hotel. But still some good stuff on here, in my opinion. But yeah, I can kind of see that the band were pretty much burned out by this point. But still some really good songs. Still a tremendous album. But, I enjoyed this. Don't get me wrong. There's no bad albums with the Flower Kings. They're all good. But yeah, I can kind of see what people mean when, Paradox Hotel marks the beginning of the end for the Flower Kings. But I think with The Sum of No Evil, it's kind of like a return to form for the Flower Kings in some ways. There are still some shorter songs, but we've still got some more lengthy songs compared to Paradox Hotel. Is The Sum of No Evil a good album? Absolutely. Is it a classic Flower Kings album? Probably not, but it's much more stronger than Paradox Hotel, in my opinion. But I enjoyed it a lot more than Paradox Hotel. Maybe some others didn't as much, but I did. I thought this was a really good album. So there you have it. The Sum of No Evil. Great album. A little bit more stronger than Paradox Hotel, but not a classic Flower Kings album. But still an enjoyable album nonetheless. So there you have it. The Sum of No Evil. Good, decent album from the Flower Kings. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2012, and it's a double album, and this one is called Banks of Eden. So Banks of Eden sees the Flower Kings return after a long hiatus with a brand new album, their first album since The Sum of No Evil, and it's a really good album. I think Banks of Eden is a very strong album, and it sees the Flower Kings return to top form, and we've got a brand new drummer, Felix Lerman, who replaces previous drummer Zoltan Sazurs, and he injects a lot of life into the band. And Banks of Eden is just fantastic. And we get the return of longtime members Jonas Reingold, Thomas Bodin, Hasse Froberg, and of course, always at the helm is the Flower King himself, Roine Stolt. And Banks of Eden, although there are still some noticeably shorter songs, by and large, overall, this is a much more stronger album than Paradox Hotel and The Sum of No Evil. Even though both of those albums had some really good, strong material, I think Banks of Eden really lets you know that the Flower Kings are back and more epic than ever. And I really love this album a lot. I thought this was a really good album. And I actually got to see the Flower Kings during this tour, and it was the first time I ever got to see them. And they had Laddie Larson open up for the Flower Kings as a solo support act, and he was fantastic. And he's been associated with the Flower Kings for a number of years, and he's collaborated with various members. And he would actually end up as a full-time member of the band many years later, and it was a fantastic show. They played a lot of material from this album as well as their classics, and I love it. I think Banks of Eden is a real strong album, and as I said, it really lets you know that the Flower Kings are back and better than ever. So on disc one, we kick off the proceedings in epic fashion with a 25-minute epic, Numbers. One of the best Flower Kings epics you will ever hear. It's just fantastic. And then we got For the Love of Gold, which is excellent. Pandemonium is great. For Those About to Drown is excellent. And Rising the Imperial is great. And then on disc two, we've got four bonus tracks. We've got Illuminati, which is excellent. Fire Ghosts is brilliant, and Going Up is great, and Low Lines is excellent. By and large, overall, a very strong album from the Flower Kings, and one that I enjoyed a lot. Just a real nice return to epic form for the band. So the standouts on disc one, easily Numbers, probably the best track of the entire album. Rising the Imperial is excellent. For the Love of Gold is great, and Fire Ghosts is brilliant on disc two, and Going Up is excellent. But by and large, overall, just a fantastic album from the Flower Kings, and really good to see these guys have regained the fire of some of their earlier albums and just sounding better than ever. And one thing I have to highlight about all of these albums from Flower Kings is the production. They all sound excellent. No bad production whatsoever. Great sounding albums, in my opinion. So there you have it. Banks of Eden, the return of the Flower Kings, sounding bigger, better, and more epic than ever. Absolutely love it. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2013, and it's a double album, and this one is called Desolation Rose. So Desolation Rose sees the band continuing on their comeback trend, which started back in 2012 with Banks of Eden, and Desolation Rose is equally as strong as Banks of Eden. Just a fantastic double album, and this would also mark the final appearance of drummer Felix Lerman, who would leave after this album. And it would also sadly mark the final appearance of longtime keyboardist Thomas Bodin, who had been one of the main cornerstones for the Flower Kings for many years and one of the band's main composers. But he really gets to go out on a real high note here. His keyboard playing is all over this album, and Felix Lerman's drumming is just really packing a punch and just beefing up the sound of the band. And Stolt, Froberg, and Reingold, they're on top form as always. And this is just a really good album, in my opinion. I think it's a really enjoyable album. Yeah, the songs are getting a bit shorter, but there's still some really good stuff here. And I really enjoyed this one a lot. So on disc one, we've got Tower One, which is 13 minutes long. Absolutely excellent. Sleeping Bones is great. Desolation Road is great. White Tuxedos is excellent. Resurrected Judas is brilliant. The Silent Masses is great. Last Carnival is great. Dark Fascist Skies is great. Blood of Eden is great. And Silent Graveyards. Excellent stuff here. Then on disc 2, which we've got bonus material, we've got Runaway Train is great. Interstellar Visitations is great. Lazy Monkey is great. Psalm 2013 is great. The Wailing Wall is great. Bad Beats is brilliant. Burning Spears is great. And the short, the final era, which is kind of poetic really and ironic because Bodin would leave the Flower Kings after this album. But it's a nice short track to end this album. So the standout tracks for me on disc 1 are Tower 1, The Resurrected Judas, The Silent Masses, Dark Fascist Skies, and Silent Graveyards and Blood of Eden. And the standouts for me on disc 2 are Interstellar Visitations, The Wailing Wall, Bad Beats, Burning Spears, and The Final Era. Overall, very good album. Very sad that Bodin left because I really felt that when he left the Flower Kings were still a great band, but I felt that they really lost a good chunk of their musical identity. And a lot of that was Bodin's keyboards because I really felt that with Bodin, he gave the Flower Kings that real prog edge. And, you know, they still have that, but I feel like they've definitely lost a good chunk of their identity. Still sounds like the Flower Kings, but not quite as much, in my opinion. So there you have it. Desolation Rose, another fine album from the Flower Kings, and sadly the final appearance of Thomas Bodin as well as Felix Lerman. But they both get to go out on real high notes. But I'm not going to lie, I do miss Bodin in the band, but at least he got to go out on a real high. So there you have it. Desolation Rose, excellent double album. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2019, and it's a double album, and this one is called Waiting for Miracles. So Felix Lerman is gone, and so is Thomas Bodin, and their replacements are two young musicians. We've got Zach Cummins on keyboards and Mirko De Meo on drums, and we've also got Jonas Reingold on bass and Hassie Froberg on vocals and backing vocals and guitar. And of course, we've got at the helm, as always, Roine Stolt on electric and acoustic guitars. And we've also got a guest appearance from original founding member, brother Michael Stolt on bass, who's featured on 4 tracks. And Waiting for Miracles is still a great Flower Kings album, but I'm not going to lie, no disrespect to Zach Cummins, who does a fine job. I do miss Thomas Bodin in the Flower Kings very much. You know, he was such a big part of all of the classic Flower Kings albums, and he's dearly missed. Mirko De Meo, a fine drummer, and in a long line of great Flower Kings drummers, he comes in and just absolutely does a tremendous job behind the drum kit, and he still to this day remains the Flower Kings drummer. Excellent addition to the band. Both Cummins and De Meo do a fine job filling in for Felix Lerman and Thomas Bodin. Thomas Bodin, big shoes to fill, but I think Zach Cummins does a tremendous job. Bit more laid back than Bodin, but he is very much his own man, and he's a fine keyboard player in his own right. So on disc 1, we've got House of Cards, which is excellent. Black Flag is great. Miracles for America, one of the best songs on this album. Vertigo is great. The Bridge is excellent. Ascending to the Stars is great. Wicked Old Symphony is great. The Rebel Circus is excellent. Sleep with the Enemy is great. And The Crowning of Greed. Brilliant stuff. And then on disc 2, we've got House of Cards Reprise. Spirals is great. Steampunk is great. We Were Always Here is great. And Busking at Brobank. Overall, a very good, strong album. As you'd expect from the Flower Kings, it's excellent. But I'm not going to lie, you know, I do miss certain people on this album, but there's still some really good music, in my opinion. So the standout tracks for me are Miracles for America, Vertigo, Ascending to the Stars, The Rebel Circus, and The Crowning of Greed. And on disc two, standouts are Spirals, We Were Always Here, and Busking at Brobank. Great album, very enjoyable. Yeah, the Flower Kings may have lost a little bit of their musical identity, but it still sounds like classic Flower Kings to me. But as I said, I do miss certain people, but still a tremendous band and still a very enjoyable album, in my opinion. So there you have it. Waiting for Miracles, a fine album from the Flower Kings. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2020, and it's a double album, and this one is called Islands. Another great album from the Flower Kings, and a lot of very short songs. So a lot of the songs are clocking in at around 4 to 6 minutes long, and one of the longest tracks on this album is like 9 minutes long. But Islands is a really good album. I really enjoyed this one a lot, and we've got Rob Townsend from the Steve Hackett Band guesting on a couple of tracks on saxophone, and just a really good album. I really like this one a lot. A little bit more stronger than Waiting for Miracles, but I like it. This was a really good album. I thought this was probably one of the better Flower Kings albums, in my opinion. I mean, they're all good, don't get me wrong, but I think I liked Islands from the more recent years. I thought this was one of their better ones, in my opinion. I think Waiting for Miracles, while it was good, it was kind of like trying to move forward away from the Bodin period. But with this album, it's a new Flower Kings lineup. We still got pretty much the same guys, but with Mirko and Zach are pretty much, full fledged Flower King men, and they both do a really good job here, and everybody is on top form. So on disc one, we've got Racing with Blinders On, excellent track. From the Ground is great. Black Swan is excellent, one of my favourite tracks from this album. Morning News is great. Broken is excellent. Goodbye Outrage is excellent. Journeyman is great. Tangerine is great. Solaris is great. Heart of the Valley is great. And Man in a Two-Piece Suit is excellent. And then on disc two, we've got All I Need Is Love is great. A New Species is excellent. Northern Lights is great. Hidden Angles is great. Serpentine is great. Looking for Answers is great. Telescope is brilliant. Fool's Gold is great. Between Hope and Fear is great. And the title track, Islands, just an amazing closer. Overall, a really good double album. More shorter songs, but still very enjoyable material. But, I thought this was one of the more stronger from the more recent Flower Kings albums, in my opinion. So the standouts for me on this one are Racing with Blinders On, Morning News, Broken, Black Swan, Solaris is great, Heart of the Valley is great, and Man in a Two-Piece Suit is great. And the standouts for me on disc two are All I Need Is Love, Serpentine, Looking for Answers, Telescope, Islands, and Between Hope and Fear. Overall, very strong double album and very enjoyable, and one of the better Flower Kings albums from recent years. Just really like this one a lot. So there you have it, Islands. Excellent album, and just a good collection of classic Flower Kings songs as far as I'm concerned. So there you have it, Islands. Love it. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2022, and it's a double album, and this one is called By Royal Decree. So, By Royal Decree would mark the final appearance of Jonas Reingold after many years playing with the Flower Kings for over 2+ decades. He would leave to play full time with Steve Hackett, which is still ongoing to this day. And Michael Stolt is back in the fold. And no disrespect to Michael Stolt, as I said earlier, a fine bass player in his own right. But when Jonas Reingold joined the Flower Kings in the 2000s, for me, Jonas Reingold joining the Flower Kings was like having Jaco Pastorius joining Weather Report. It was a huge game changer and a big deal. And Reingold's bass playing really helped change the game and really helped elevate Flower Kings music in a big way. and he was a huge part of forging the iconic sound that we know now. And he gets to go out on a real high, but I kind of guessed that the writing was on the wall because the last couple of albums, while Roine Stolt was part of it, I could see that he was partially on it. So it'll be half him and half Michael Stolt. So I kind of guessed that he was trying to juggle both schedules with the Flower Kings and Steve Hackett. So in the end, he left the Flower Kings, which I'm not going to lie, was a bad blow. And you know, when you lose two guys like Thomas Bodin and Jonas Reingold, two big men in the Flower Kings, two cornerstones, not easy guys to replace, in my opinion. But by royal decree, excellent double album, very enjoyable. And this would also mark the final appearance of Zach Cummins as he would leave as well. But really enjoyed this album a lot. I thought this was a really good album. And you know, equally as good as Islands, in my opinion. Just a really good, strong album and some really good stuff here. So on disc one, we've got The Great Pretender, which is excellent. World Gone Crazy, which is brilliant. Blinded is great. A Million Stars is great. The Soldier is brilliant. The Darkness in You is great. We Can Make It Work is great. Peacock on Parade is great. And Revolution is excellent. And then on disc two, we've got Time the Great Healer is great. Letter is brilliant. Evolution is great. Silent Ways is great. Moth is brilliant. The Big Funk is great. Open Your Heart is great. Shrine piano intro is great. And Funeral Pyres is great. Still some relatively shortish songs, but I think overall there's some really good material. I think, you know, there's no big epics as such, but there's still a lot of great songs on here. So we've got the standouts for me on this one is The Great Pretender, World Gone Crazy, The Soldier, The Darkness in You, and Peacock on Parade, which is excellent. And the standouts for me on disc two are Time the Great Healer, Evolution, Silent Ways, The Big Funk, and Funeral Pyres. But overall, by royal decree, very enjoyable double album, equally as good as Islands. I just think this was a fantastic album, in my opinion. No epics, I'm afraid, but still lots of great songs, in my opinion. So there you have it. By royal decree, a fine album from the Flower Kings, in my opinion. Love it. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2023, and this one is called Look at You Now. So, Look at You Now features Roine Stolt's brother Michael Stoltz, Hassie Froberg, and Mirko Di Meo. And we've also got guest contributions from Marjana Semkina, Eugen Saude, Hassie Brunissen, and Lally Larsen, who would also go on to become a full-time member of the band. And Look at You Now, pretty good album in my opinion. The songs, a lot of them are quite short. There are a couple of longish tracks, but I thought this was a really good album, in my opinion. And, you know, the thing about the Flower Kings, when you've done so much music, so many long songs, you know, it's kind of hard to keep that level up. But they do kind of go back to that a little bit with this album. All the songs kind of like all link into one another, but it's a really good album. I really enjoyed this one a lot. So we've got Beginner's Eyes, which is great. The Dream is excellent. Hollow Man is great. Doctor Ribdu is great. Mother Earth is excellent. The Queen is great. The Light in Your Eyes is great. Season's End is great. Scars is great. Stronghold is brilliant. Father Sky is excellent. Day for Peace, which is one of my favourite songs on this album. And we got the last track, which is the closer, which is 12 minutes long, the title track, Look at You Now. But I thought overall, Look at You Now was a really good, strong album. And, you know, as I said, there are a lot of short songs, but I thought overall this was a fine album, in my opinion. But there are no bad albums from the Flower Kings. As I said already, there are just some that I feel that are a little bit better than others. And of course, we've got some classics and we've got some excellent ones. We've got some underrated ones, and we've got a couple that they're okay, but you know, maybe not as strong as some of the others. But this album, Look at You Now, a fine album, in my opinion. So standout tracks for me are Beginner's Eyes, Mother Earth, The Light in Your Eyes, Season's End, Stronghold, Father Sky, Day for Peace, and Look at You Now. Really good album, very enjoyable, and just a fine Flower Kings album. And you can kind of see that the Flower Kings are starting to go back to the earlier style, but I like it. I thought this was a decent album. Everybody's on top form. Roine Stolt is on top form on vocals and guitars. Hasse Froberg, just a fantastic singer. He works so well with Stolt. Their harmonies, much like Yes, are a huge part of the Flower Kings sound. And Michael Stolt, a fine bass player in his own right. He does a really good job here. Mirko De Meo is just a fantastic drummer and one of the best Flower Kings drummers that the band have had in recent years. He plays a big part in this album. He's just fantastic. So there you have it. Look at You Now, a great album from the Flower Kings, in my opinion. Fantastic. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2025, and this one is called Love. So, Love features an all new Flower Kings lineup comprised of Roine Stolt, Michael Stolt, Hasse Froberg, and Mirko De Meo, and Lally Larson. So, this is the current Flower Kings lineup going forward, and it's really good to hear the Flower Kings back on top form. And the band have never sounded better, and this album, Love, is probably one of the band's strongest albums in recent years. I absolutely enjoyed this one so much, and I've listened to this one quite a few times now, and I just loved it. I thought this was one of the better and more stronger albums from the Flower Kings in recent years, and a big reason for that is Lally Larson, a fantastic keyboard player, and he fills the shoes of Thomas Bodin beautifully. No disrespect to Zach Cummins, he did a fine job, but Larry Larson is the whole package. A great pianist, a great keyboardist, great composer. He is the whole package, and he gives the Flower Kings a much more jazz fusion edge, whereas Bodin gave the band more of a prog edge. Larry Larson still does that, but he brings more of the jazzy side for the Flower Kings, and he's fantastic. He's all over this album, and the band have never sounded better. After many years of you know different people coming in and out, we have finally settled on a stable lineup, and what an album Love is. I just think it's excellent and one of the better Flower Kings albums from recent years. So we've got We Claim the Moon, which is a great opener. The Elder is great. How Can You Leave Us Now is excellent. World Spinning is great. Burning Both Edges is great. The Rubble is great. Kaiser Eraser is great. The Phoenix is excellent. The Promise is great. Love is excellent. Walls of Shame is great. And Considerations is excellent. So we've got a couple of epics. So we're kind of seeing like the Flower Kings reverting back to their old self. And I just think this album is excellent. I think for me, the second half of the album all the way to the end is just unbelievable. I'm not saying the first half isn't good. It's all good, but I think the second half it really picks up. And holy cow, this album is just fantastic. And one of the more better and more stronger albums from the Flower Kings, in my opinion. I just thought this was a really good album, and I've listened to this quite a few times, and I love it. It's one of my favourite albums from more recent years, in my opinion. So the standouts for me are The Elder, How Can You Leave Us Now, The Rubble, The Phoenix, The Promise, Love Is, Walls of Shame, and Considerations. But the whole album, top to bottom, is just fantastic. And no pun intended, Love is amazing. Just an amazing album from the Flower Kings. And we finally got a stable lineup. And the standout musician for me is Lally Larson. He's just all over this album. Big keyboards, lots of piano work, and he really helps inject new life into the band. And he really helps fill the void that Bodin left behind, in my opinion. I just think he's a tremendous keyboard player with a lot of great ideas and just an amazing player all round. So there you have it. Love. One of the better and more stronger albums from the Flower Kings in recent years, and one of my all time favourites from the band. Absolutely love it. Fantastic album. So, which album out of all 17 studio albums do I think is the best Flower Kings album? Well, like I said at the beginning, there are no bad albums in this band's catalogue. There are some that are excellent, there are some that are classics, there are a couple that are underrated, there are a couple that maybe not as strong as some of the others, and there are a few that I feel that are a little bit better than some of the other albums. But by and large, overall, this catalogue from the Flower Kings is tremendously strong, and you can't go wrong with any of these albums. Any of these albums could be an all-time favourite or a number one. But if I had to choose one album from the Flower Kings that I feel is the best one, I am going with Stardust We Are. I think this album really captured the Flower Kings at their peak. Lots of classic songs that they still play to this day, and you can't go up against Stardust We Are. It's the Flower Kings epic, and you just can't beat it. It's probably the greatest Flower Kings song of all time. And there are a lot of good songs, but I think Stardust We Are is their signature track. You cannot go to a Flower Kings gig without hearing that song because you wouldn't be at a Flower Kings gig otherwise without hearing that track. You have to, it's mandatory. But Stardust We Are, best Flower Kings album ever. For me, the greatest Flower Kings album of all time. And there are a lot of good albums here, but I think Stardust We Are, they really truly captured lightning in a bottle, as far as I'm concerned. So there you have it. Stardust We Are, the album that I consider to be the Flower Kings' greatest album of all time. A classic, in my opinion. Absolutely love it. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What's your favourite album from the Flower Kings? Is it Back in the World of Adventures, Retropolis, Stardust We Are, Flower Power, Space Revolver, The Rainmaker, Unfold the Future, Adam and Eve, Paradox Hotel, The Sum of No Evil, Banks of Eden, Desolation Rose, Waiting for Miracles, Islands, By Royal Decree, Look at You Now, or Love? There's no right or wrong answer. We all have our favourite albums. You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Progressive Rock and Metal album review series. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.